Abby Martin from the Empire Files got a chance to ask House Speaker Nancy Pelosi about how the Pentagon contributes to the climate crisis during the COP26 summit. Now, you can tell that Nancy Pelosi really had no idea who Abby Martin was, because had she known who Abby Martin was and had she been familiar with Abby Martin's excellent reporting, she maybe wouldn't be willing to call on her to ask a question. But nonetheless, Pelosi saw it as an opportunity to provide the optics of caring about gender equality just by the very nature of calling on Abby Martin, a woman, to ask her a question. Let's hear how this all started out.
Wait a minute, I want a woman, I want a woman, a woman, a woman. Gender equality, yeah.
That moment is so indicative of what you can expect from the Democratic Party today, right? Just giving you the optics of inclusion and tolerance and caring about diversity and gender equality, but again, when it comes to actual substantive policy, something I argue all the time, Democrats don't deliver. So it's cute when you kneel in a kente cloth because you want to provide the optics of caring about the African-American community. But how about pass the police reform that the community has been demanding? It's cute when you pretend to care about women and equality for women or creating a better society for women to succeed in. But how about you fight a little more, aggressively in regard to paid family leave, in regard to providing affordable childcare. But of course, when it comes to fighting aggressively on those matters, Nancy Pelosi gives up quite easily. But nonetheless, that's not what this topic is about. I want to go to Abby Martin now, who asks an important question.
Speaker Pelosi, you just presided over a large increase in the Pentagon budget. This Pentagon budget is already massive. The Pentagon is a larger polluter than 140 countries combined. How can we seriously talk about net zero if there is this bipartisan consensus to constantly expand this large contributor to climate change, which is exempt from these conferences? Military is exempt from climate talks.
Now, I wanted to kind of take that question separately and give you guys a little more context before we get to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's answer on it, which, as you can imagine, was a disappointing answer. But nonetheless, I think that the question asked there was, first of all, unusual given the conferences that typically take place, the type of questions that are typically asked. You very rarely hear individuals hold Americans, officials' feet to the fire, especially when it comes to something as serious as our military spending, our defense spending, and what Abby Martin mentioned there is 100% accurate. So I went back to look at some data regarding what she said, right, in the context of that question. And here's what we know. The US military is one of the largest polluters in history, consuming more liquid fuels and emitting more climate changing gases than most medium-sized countries. If the United States military were a country, its fuel usage alone would make it the 47th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, sitting between Peru and Portugal. But I'm not done yet. I really want to hone in on just how bad the military is when it comes to serving as a polluter, serving as a huge factor in the climate crisis. So for instance, in 2017, according to Quartz, the US military bought about 269,230 barrels of oil a day and emitted more than 25,000 kilotons of carbon dioxide by burning those fuels. In fact, the US Air Force purchased $4.9 billion worth of fuel, and the Navy $2.8 billion, followed by the Army at $947 million, and the Marines at $36 million. So there's quite a bit of fossil fuel consumption by the Defense Department. And so the question is not only valid, it's an incredibly critical, important question to ask during a summit that's supposed to tackle the climate crisis. Now, Abby Martin mentioned the Pentagon being exempt. What did she mean by that? Well, the United States insisted on an exemption for reporting military emissions in the 1997 Kyoto Protocol. The loophole was closed by the Paris Accord, but With the Trump administration due to withdraw from the accord in 2020, which of course he did, that gap did return, right? So this Quartz article is a little older. I believe it was published in 2018, but nonetheless, the data is still relevant, and the data is what Abby Martin is referencing in the context of her question. Now, to be fair, the military has attempted to get a little bit greener, but not by much. In fact, it's negligible when you look at the data. The military has invested in developing alternative energy sources like biofuels, but these comprise only a tiny fraction of spending on fuels. It remains the single largest institutional consumer of hydrocarbons in the world. It has also locked itself into hydrocarbon-based weapon systems for years to come by depending on existing aircraft and warships for open-ended operations. And of course, when it comes to the topic of military spending, you guys don't need me to tell you, it takes priority over social safety net programs. It takes priority over providing paid family leave. Takes priority over paying for childcare so parents can, go to work and feel comfortable doing so. So just to give you the latest numbers in regard to the National Defense Authorization Act, the House, which of course Nancy Pelosi is the speaker of, voted 316 to 113 to pass a $777.9 billion defense policy bill. That's for 1 year. That's for fiscal year 2022. In fact, the fiscal year 2022 NDAA included an amendment to add an additional $23.9 billion to the defense budget. Representative Mike Rogers, a Republican from Alabama, proposed the amendment, which was approved by the House panel in early September. Now, with all of that context, which again, I think is so important to really understand the gravity of the question being asked here, why don't we go to the first individual who tried to take a shot at answering it. This is Representative Frank Pallone, and his answer, not good, very bad. Let's watch.
The sea level rise is an important part of what's happening to the climate. And I am not a defense person, but I've had so many talks with the Defense Department, with the Navy in particular, about how they have to respond to what's going on. So I really do think that there is no reason why what we're putting together, with Build Back Better and other things, can't respond to the Defense Department and have the same impact in terms of reducing emissions. And I do think that the Defense Department is very much aware of the fact that they have to play a major role, both from a strategic as well as for the good of the world. So I don't see what we're doing in any way, or increasing the defense budget, as being something that's inconsistent with climate action. I really don't.
Pallone's answer really failed to give any specifics. It was pretty vague. Really, all you could do is speculate as to what he's referring to, because he does say that the Defense Department is incredibly important in responding to the sea level rise. Now, think about what sea level rise translates to. It translates to a migration crisis, certainly in parts of the world where people can no longer live as a result of flooding, extreme weather events, those kinds of things. And when you have these mass migrations, how do you think the United States intends to respond to that? So luckily, Nancy Pelosi did jump in later, and she got a little more specific. Let's watch.
National security advisors all tell us that the climate crisis is a national security matter. It is, of course, a health matter for our children, the water they drink, the air they breathe, etc. It is a jobs issue between good, clean technologies being the future of our workforce and the training for all of that. It is a national security issue because of all of the conditions that climate crisis produces. I won't go into all of them, but they are cause for migration, conflict over habitat and resources.
Oh, migration, conflict. We need the Defense Department, right? Rather than doing its part to respond to the climate crisis appropriately, The United States is doing exactly what the United States can be expected to do. Let's beef up military spending because we might need the military to provide national security when our behavior over decades has contributed to a planet that people have difficulty living on because of extreme weather conditions, because of flooding, because of extreme heat, drought, wildfires, all of those issues. Now, of course, we're experiencing some of that within our own borders. And she's not really focusing on that much, but she is focusing on the problems that will arise and have already begun to arise as a result of the climate crisis. Our inaction, our unwillingness to respond to climate change appropriately is going to lead to all sorts of conflict, which is precisely why the Pentagon sees climate change as a national security threat. Instead of doing something to prevent those threats from taking place, the United States government has decided, we'll do some stuff around the edges, kind of, maybe, not really. And then if things get really bad, we can rely on the military to close our borders, protect our borders, prevent, migrants from trying to come in as a result of what we've contributed to in destroying their own homeland. And that's how we're gonna respond to it. So yeah, we need to increase military spending. It's a scary, scary world when we need to rely on private military contractors to save us from the damage that is done from climate change, right? Or the consequences that will come as a result of climate change. But that's what Nancy Pelosi is essentially saying there. Listen, when it comes to military spending, it's really a bipartisan issue. Democrats and Republicans love it. The National Defense Authorization Act passes without any trouble at all. And really, the only solace I feel or get in talking about this story is that for once, we have an actual journalist, Abby Martin, asking a real question during the summit that purports to care about climate change, that purports to want to find real solutions to at least slow down the climate crisis. So good on Abby Martin. Everyone check out Empire Files. It's a great channel on YouTube. And they cover all sorts of foreign policy issues that I really think they deserve a lot more credit for doing. So definitely take a look at that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.